Vice President JD Vance is responding now to that infamous Young Republicans group chat that was leaked to Politico this week, including racist, anti-Semitic remarks and jokes about the Holocaust, Nazis, and Hitler. Here's the Vice President's response to the widespread outrage over those texts.
Focusing on what kids are saying in a group chat, grow up. I'm sorry, focus on the real issues, don't focus on what kids say in group chats. The reality is that kids do stupid things, especially young boys. They tell edgy, offensive jokes, like that's what kids do. And I really don't want us to grow up in a country where a kid telling a stupid joke, telling a very offensive stupid joke, is cause to ruin their lives. And at some point, we're all going to have to say, enough of this BS.
But there has been some pushback on Vance's characterization of the group chat members as kids. Mother Jones reports that 8 of the 11 members of that chat were between the ages of 24 to 35.
That fact did not escape the hosts of The View, who called out the Vice President on air for excusing the language. And co-host Alyssa Farah-Griffin, a former national spokesperson for the college RNC, took it a step further.
There is a dark underbelly in our politics that has allowed racism, it's allowed hate, it's allowed misogyny, and we've just kind of normalized it on the right. And there's not enough folks who are willing to just call it out for what it is.
And Griffin then continued.
Secondarily, there is this crisis of young men. This is almost universally young men of a certain age. I don't want to stereotype them, but they don't look like guys who have a lot of friends, who have girlfriends, have intimate relationships. I don't mean this to be mean, but the stats speak for themselves. If you don't have community and you live online mostly, you can be radicalized to hate people. You don't engage with people. You don't have empathy for people. It's very scary, and leaders need to wake up to it.
So we're going to have a spirited discussion about this one,
I think we will, yes.
I've had a lot to say about this all week. People keep asking me what I think because I've written a lot about cancel culture and people getting in trouble for saying offensive things and that coming back to haunt them. I will concede that I agree with the criticism of saying that they're kids and they're boys is stripping them of a little bit of agency. They're in their 20s and 30s. I think we should practice very broad forgiveness for people getting in trouble for something they said up through 18. I don't care if you tweeted some offensive remark when you were 13, and then that hurts you when you're applying to college. We need to disregard all of that because it's unfair. It's brutally unfair to kids who grow up today because of social media and cell phones and texting. The conversations that you and I would have had as young people that they're just forgotten and were never transcribed for all the world to see now exist as pieces of content. It's not fair to them. So up until 18, I don't care. Throw it out. These people are obviously older than that, and they're in communications roles. They aspire to be young Republican communications heads. And what I would say to Vance or whoever is making excuses for them, like even if you have no moral opposition with them doing this, you should still, maybe privately then, not publicly, instruct young Republican leaders not to use this language or not to practice using it so much because it is off-putting. And people who talk like this in private all the time will not elect Republicans because most people find edgy, Nazi joking type stuff to be weird, creepy. So Republicans should tell their people not to talk like that, just in the same way that Democrats should not tell their people to like simp for Hamas or whatever.
Look, there are some political controversies that come up that I take a kind of somewhat light view of, or that I think people can be overwrought about. In this one, I think what Vance said was itself disgraceful because it was trying to, you used the word excuse, I think, get people off the hook for comments that were flagrantly racist or sexist or anti-Semitic or xenophobic and were made well into adulthood. We quoted the Nation's example there of them being 24 to 35, or 8 of the 11 were. One of the people involved in these chats is a state senator in Vermont, I believe. So this, like, oh, it's only kids joking, is just fundamentally untrue. Now, there is a whole separate argument to your point about, people who are in fact kids, there I would have much more sympathy with your position when we're talking about people when they're 13 or 14 or 15, at a time when people's, literally their brains are not fully developed and they're on social media and then they're castigated for that years later. I do think that that's a different case. But here you have people in the Republican Party making these gross comments. I mean, there was one instance about essentially how can you trust a Jew or something. There were jokes about Indian people's bathing habits. There was descriptions of rape as epic. I mean, this was horrendous stuff. And for the Vice President of the United States to come out and try to minimize that or play it down or to suggest it's sort of childish horseplay, I think is massively offensive, and also is just letting those kind of toxic currents that Alyssa Farah Griffin talked about fester to an even greater extent.
So I read through a lot of the examples that were given, and I do think it is important to draw some distinctions. Certainly, there were things said there that were just abjectly racist and abjectly gross and are bad and are anti-Semitic. Some of it was sarcasm and joke. In fact, the one in the headline, actually the clearest example of where the person was not literally saying they actually love Hitler, but that's what it was in the headline of this article. I love Hitler. That was it. Rolling your eyes like, oh yes, I'm such a Nazi. I love Hitler. It was not intended that way. There were certainly messages in there that just betrayed a kind of level, a kind of maliciousness toward the maligned groups that is not healthy. I will say, though, this is characteristic of how, when I say young, I don't mean, obviously, they're not teenagers. They're 20-somethings. Young men talk to each other now. There has been a cultural shift toward this. I have noticed this in private conversations. I mean, I have a million different chats with people of all stripes, but the spaces that are, it's a male thing, even more than an ideological thing. This is how men of this age sound. Maybe this is more extreme than that, to be clear. But I was not surprised. I wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe they're saying these things. I'm not shocked by it at all. I encounter it all the time. What I suspect is going on is that this is a notion I've developed. I'm interested to get your response to it. It is possible to segregate into male-only communicative spaces, this is what results. Because women are feminine perspective is a civilizing force. I mean, they're not to broadly stereotype, because there's all sorts of exceptions all the way, but there are differences between men and women that are more substantial and rooted in some kind of biology. The feminine perspective that follows from that is a tempering force. I understand why Alyssa Farah Griffin is shocked by this, because even if she's in group chats with deeply conservative right-wing women like Amber,
right.
There's no way they're not talking like this, because women do not talk like this, and they do not tolerate this kind of talk. So if you had just a small number, just interaction with women, that will temper that kind of impulse. So I would also say to them, if they aspire to, as many right-wing young guys do, they want to meet a nice conservative woman, start a family, raise kids. Talking like this will sink you in the dating market and in the realm of, as I said, of electing Republicans, of just interacting with normal people every single time. So you should train yourself not to do it.
Well, let me connect that to where you started off, those comments with, sink you in the dating market, whatever. Hopefully it would. I mean, it's just completely wrong. That's the issue. And when we get into, this comment XYZ, those comments were flagrantly racist, but comments ABC were perhaps joking, I'm not sure how much it matters that some of the comments were joking when they are side by side with comments that are obviously racist or anti-Semitic or sexist or whatever. I mean, those things people need to take responsibility for saying those things. So that, I think, is the major part of it. The other point is, we could get into the gender issue and how the different sexes communicate, certainly. But, I mean, I'm resistant to the idea of just like JD Vance's thing, even setting aside the kids' issue, was like, oh, well, this is how people joke. Like, do they? I mean, I have, particularly when I was younger, I had plenty of, like, I would say, chats that I probably wouldn't necessarily want on the front page of a newspaper, but they weren't flagrant racism or making fun of Jewish people or black people or even sarcastically saying I love Hitler. So is that, I mean, if that is, if the argument is that's normalized, that's a problem in itself.
I believe you, although I think we would all recoil in horror if we actually read it. Maybe not literally all of us. Maybe you're unusually civil. I'm perfectly willing to believe that. I mean, I'm sure in my adolescence, I don't think I hurled racial slurs at people. I'm sure I hurled homophobic slurs at people. I'm very certain that I did. I confess that I did. I don't hold animus toward LGBT people in my adulthood, or even at the time, but I'm sure I did, because you do it to fit in. There's a certain kind of using language to establish a kind of solidarity. Again, I am not trying to let them off the hook either, but there's also a, like, South Park is very funny. Eric Cartman is very funny. And even doing like an impression of Eric Cartman can be funny. And then it's when you cross that line into, no, I actually am Eric Cartman and my views are Eric Cartman, that you start to, that is certainly maybe beyond being blurred here.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of it. I also think there has been we are living through an overcorrection, a huge backlash to political correctness, cancel culture, the whatever, the 2016 to 2022 period, and the backlash to that has gone, as backlashes often do, has gone way too far in the other direction. The free that you're no longer going to get canceled for having said a slur when you were 14 is good, and has been taken too far to be like, and now we should affirmatively
slur people all the time in adulthood.
In that language, in our own adulthood, and expect to face, not only not get crucified for it, but face literally no consequences and be celebrated for it, is where we've gone, and I absolutely think that's really bad.
Yeah.
But again, I think the literal solution to it is to have more women in the midst of these kinds of people. I think that's the literal.
Well, just briefly on the point of backlashes, because you know there's always a backlash to a backlash to a backlash to a backlash, right?
Right.
So the reason that what is I think pejoratively known as political correctness arose in the first place was because there was language that was in fact dehumanizing or subtly racist or subtly sexist, that was in fact serving to perpetuate unjust ways of looking at the world. And so what is now called political correctness arose to try to eradicate that. And then you could certainly argue that parts of it went too far. But we can't argue that in the backlash to the excesses of political correctness or cancel culture, it's now just okay to hurl racial abuse around. And
I'm not saying it's okay.
I know you're not, but I mean, I think that the argument that people like Vance are putting forth is like, oh, we shouldn't really worry about this. They're just being edgy against the kind of spirit of the times. They're being racist or anti-Semitic or sexist, and that needs to be called out clearly.
Yeah, we've gone the jump from 2018, your college puts out a list of microaggressions that like clapping is ableist, to people are just affirmatively using slurs and not being denounced by thought leaders of their own party is a crazy trajectory.
Right.
That and it's not everyone on the right saying that. Like the Babylon Bee guys who have been feuding with Vance and Walsh over some of the, they're more supportive of Israel and they're worried about how much, not lack of support for Israel, but actual like malice toward Jews is an undercurrent of Zoomer GOP politics. We're saying like we gotta do some gay. And Ben Shapiro had a big monologue this week saying that responding to Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh said the left doesn't doesn't police its own, and that's their strength. We do too much turning on each other. And Ben Shapiro, and I don't always take Ben Shapiro's side in the Ben Shapiro-Matt Walsh divide, but Ben Shapiro was like, no, that's why they're irrelevant, and we have political power because we do a little bit of policing, and that is healthy for a movement to do that. I think it would certainly be healthy for them to do a little bit of policing on this front.
I think it would be, to say the least, yes. And I do agree with you that women are generally a civilizing influence, by the way. I should get that in before we go.
Yes. Get girlfriends, guys. That's my advice. Do as I say, not as I do.
Talking of civilizing influences, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders recently participated in a CNN town hall. We'll look at some of the highlights right after this.